Hello, hello, hello. Try again. Hello, hello, hello. So today we will continue with the failures of the ANC. Before you get triggered, remember that, well, if in case you haven't noticed, I've made a series of victories about the ANC as well. So let's dive in, shall we? Transition to democracy, failures and missteps. The ANC's leadership in South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy was a monumental achievement, but it was not without its compromises, criticisms, and shortcomings. As the ANC negotiated with the apartheid government, it faced the difficult task of balancing the ideals of economic justice and redistribution with the demands for a peaceful transition. While the ANC successfully secured political freedom, its compromises on economic transformation have been a subject of lasting debate and criticism. Many South Africans feel that the ANC's approach to negotiations sacrificed economic equality, leaving the country with enduring socio-economic disparities and unfulfilled promises. So, this is a complaint. It's usually, it's aired by many people globally as well, like academics, scholars. And on the ground in South Africa, it's usually brought up or mentioned by black South Africans, essentially that Mandela or the ANC made a poor deal, a weak deal that they didn't secure, because the ANC had this thing, or do they still have it? I don't know. The Freedom Charter, which is kind of the constitution of the ANC. We spoke about it in the historic video on the victories. And the Freedom Charter, one of the things it states is that the wealth shall belong to everyone in the country, something like that. And they argue that, okay, in 1994, everyone got political freedom, but not economic freedom. And that's a valid argument. If you look at, for example, land distribution patterns, the statistics are there for people to see. I believe, white farmers, commercial farmers owe 70% of arable land. So you see it's uneven. So, and then if you look at the ownership of companies, let's say directorships, who holds directorships, high positions, these kinds of things, it does seem that, it's a fact that black South Africans are held back to an extent because they don't have capital. Let's continue. One of the most significant criticisms of the ANC's role in the transition process centers on the negotiated settlement with the apartheid government. Some argue that the ANC, in its desire to secure a peaceful transfer of power, made too many concessions to the existing white economic elite. Although the ANC gained political control, the economic structures established during apartheid remained largely intact. This compromise allowed white-owned corporations, industries, and wealth to remain concentrated in the small portion of the population, perpetuating inequality, even in a democratic South Africa. The persistence of economic inequality is one of the deepest legacies of apartheid, and many South Africans feel that the ANC's negotiation strategy failed to address it adequately. So, yes, okay, just a note here, which I would like to make a separate video about this, but there is an argument that, the ANC and Nelson Mandela in particular. So Nelson Mandela is known, for those of you who don't know Nelson Mandela, you're either, you don't read a lot or you're super young. If you're 16 years old, okay, by the way, if you're 16 years old, you're not supposed to watch this channel, but I guess, okay, your history books haven't gotten there yet. Okay, you haven't read about Nelson Mandela, but like essentially he's seen not just in South Africa, globally, as this figure of like reconciliation and peace and fuzziness and, you know, all of the good things. Obviously had a bad side as well, but his good sides, like, overwhelmingly was better than his bad side. So people see this just as they just see weaknesses, you know, like many South Africans view it as weaknesses, like, and they say he didn't like negotiate a good deal. But the fact of the matter is, like, I saw it on this E! News documentary, and it's a fact as well, because I read some books on the South African nuclear program and the war in Angola and so on. The South African apartheid government had nuclear weapons, 6.5 to be exact. And there wasn't there was the nuclear weapons, so they didn't, and they had delivery devices for them as well. Like not ballistic missiles, but, you know, like aircraft, long distance aircraft. They weren't 100% sure if they would use them or not, like either within South Africa or outside the borders, like let's say in Angola. They weren't sure, like, you know, either the ANC, not even the CIA knew exactly what, you know, will go, because it's a psychological issue, it's not an intelligence issue. Like, you can't say for sure, like, let's do a quick experiment. What am I going to do next? Tell me. Make a bet. How many of you thought I was going to touch my nose? Huh? Okay, well, yeah, so now you've got a little model, I guess, to see in the next video if I do such an experiment again, you know, if you will fall for it or not. But the fact of the matter is, like, you can't read the psychology always of your opponent. You can predict it to an extent, but they struggle to predict, like, and this was the dying days of apartheid. Like, so these politicians, P.W. Botha, F.W. de Klerk, they were desperate. Like, they were cornered. They didn't, like, know exactly what to do. So, like, P.W. Botha was maybe a bit more visionary, like, than F.W. de Klerk. Like F.W. de Klerk, by the way, while we're at it, like, he's viewed by some people in the Afrikaans community as a sellout. Like, they said you negotiated a poor deal with the ANC. Just, you know, he said, she said. Like, but in any case, you had the nuclear weapons. Then you had these goddamn, like, freaky, witchy, far-right groups like the AWB, who, those guys were nuts. Like, their leader was called Eugene Terblanche, and if you looked at the guy's speeches, he looked like Saddam Hussein or Hitler. The guy was clearly not, you know, not normal. And, like, he didn't have a lot of supporters, maybe 5,000, 3,000 people, but still, you know, they didn't know what he was going to do. Then there was, like, other far-right terrorists, like Die Wit Wolf. Die Wit Wolf, meaning the White Wolf, was this lone gunman, and he basically went to Kerkplein Church Square in Pretoria, and he shot a bunch of black people because he's, like, crazy racist. There was this guy called, which one? Yeah, there were two of them, Janusz Walusz and Chris Darby. Janusz Walusz was the guy who shot Chris Hani, and, like, personally. And then you had, Clive Darby Lewis gave him the gun. And also, so it's these far-right groups, and then, like, you had local people as well. You had, like, the president of Babu Botswana, Lucas Mankope, who was a hard ass. You had the you had the president of like Saskay, what was his name? That guy was kind of crazy as well. The president of Saskay was, I forgot his name, but that guy was also responsible for a massacre. It's like Ronnie Casserol's one of the ANC leaders. They led a march into Bisho in like the Eastern Cape in the Republic of Saskay. And this guy just like told the army to open fire on them. And basically he killed a bunch of them. And then you had the IFP. We spoke about the IFP in the previous video. You had like the PAC, all of these, you know, you have all of this like, and then you had the Cubans in Angola, like, and the CIA and the Soviet Union. And, you know, everything was involved. Like there was like so many factors. So Nelson Mandela sat probably, you know, like, and he tried to make sense of this chaos. And like the easiest way out of it would be to find a simple solution, not a complicated solution, a simple solution, like that can work for everyone, at least for the time being. And that's what he tried, because South Africa did seem like that it was going to go towards a civil war. And yeah, it's like unfortunate that I have to mention this in the ANC victories, like, sorry, the ANC defeats or failures video, but it has to be said, just like in case you missed the others. So there's this dualism that Mandela sold out, but then there's the very real fact that, you know, people don't have land. Land's like, land is the biggest thing, because we spoke about it as well, like the land as a spiritual, emotional bond for people. Like, so, you know, people are upset about it still. We will be, like, until they solve this issue, we will be like everybody. I don't have land, I don't really want any either, but like people who have and want land will be upset for a while. Okay. One major aspect of this compromise was the protection of private property rights, which prevented large-scale redistribution of land and resources that might have transformed the economy more equitably. Land ownership, in particular, remained a contentious issue, as the apartheid government's policies had displaced countless black South Africans and left a vast amount of land in the white hands. While the ANC promised to address land redistribution, the negotiated settlement effectively limited the scope of potential reforms, making it difficult to address historical injustices fully. In the ANC's compromise on land reform, has led to persistent dissatisfaction, as millions of South Africans continue to live without land or access to resources that would help alleviate poverty. So the private property rights, I can't go into that too much because I'm not a lawyer. I think you don't need to be a lawyer, but you need to understand like the law, and which I don't, like at least property law, to go deeper into it. And in South Africa, you have like your land is well protected. Like I remember when they built the Gautrain, which is this train like that we have in South Africa in Gauteng province, like the government had to buy out the land of like the people, the houses that the new carriageway or like, you know, the railway track was going through. They had to buy those people out. And in some cases, people said, no, your compensation isn't enough. Like, you need to give us more. And the project was held up for a long time, like, I don't know, 1-2 years, like, because these cases had to be settled because of property laws. Now, like, I'm in favor of property laws because of, like, you know, it's just how nations succeed. But when there's disparity, when there's inequality, you need to re-look at this. You know, like, there are I don't have all the facts and figures. I will do a land video, but like there are people who are not using land. That's a fact. There are people who are speculating in land. That's also a fact. And then there's people who's just generally inefficient, with their farming. And that goes for black and white. Like that land should be redistributed, like to people who can farm, who want to farm, and who will be good, who will be good at it. Because remember, we want inflation down in South Africa. Like, we can't like have high inflation because of like 50,000 landowners. We need like, a country that will work, for all of the citizens. Because remember, the cities get this food, and everyone's always like, oh, thank the farmers. And yes, farmers, you are doing a great job. Please don't crucify me. But remember, the cities also provide a service to you, in the form of like medicine, the army, civil engineers, electricity generation, services that you receive, like imported goods, like your telephone, your radio, whatever. Like these things like have to happen through. That's like I'm a libertarian leaning person, but that's why libertarianism will never work, because libertarianism can't organize cities, and we live in cities. We have evolved. Like, sorry, there's a massive tangent, but like, yeah, look, when there's inequality, this has to be adjusted, like the private property thing, where so that there can be, you don't have like a feudal system. And to a certain extent, we have a kind of a feudal system in South Africa in certain areas. Like, in some most farm workers have full-time employment, but in many cases, they are seasonally employed. So you have work for 3 months of the year, and maybe you can live on the land while nothing is happening. But, you're at the mercy of the landlord. So, like, he can evict you at any time. And, there is like, this is not good, it's not good, like, so, and then there is like, the thing is about the land, a lot of it was legitimately stolen, like in the 1913 Land Act, they literally took it away and signed it over, like, so that's a massive failure of the ANC. Those of you who've seen the movie District 9 with the aliens and the prawns, like that is a wordplay on District 6. District 6 was a place where like mixed ethnicity folk stayed, and then with the Land Act, I don't know which one, like, but they had to move. Like, it was in Cape Town. They had to like clear the area for white people. So, your great-grandmother or your great-great-grandmother, I don't know, my math, it's now 2024, go back all those generations. But like, she lost her land, and like, if that was kept in the family, even if it was just the eldest son, okay, that's maybe, sorry woman, like nothing against you. But even if it was given, the eldest daughter, let's make it fair. If it was with the presumption every generation it's given to the eldest daughter, then that land still remains in the hands of the ethnicity to whom it originally belonged. So here is the problem, you see. Like, so you can be a white farmer, sure, and you may have been on the land for 5 generations, but before that, there were people on the land for much longer, and you could have bought the farm. Like, my uncle bought this farm, my nephew bought his farms, they're quite rich, but like, I don't know, like basically they had to buy the land and make sure there was no claim on it. You know, like you can put a claim on land that doesn't belong to you. That doesn't belong to someone else. It belongs to you, and you can prove it, like by lineage. And the problem is these things, like they go to the land court, and it takes forever to clear something in the land court. So these things just freaking go on forever. So there's this frustration, and this is why people would say Nelson Mandela sold out. It's not really Nelson Mandela, it's the freaking ANC. Like, the ANC had so many leaders. It wasn't Nelson Mandela like this, like that movie, The Dictator of Sacha Baron Cohen, like, okay, you do this, you do that, like, micromanaging every step of the way. No ways, like that's impossible for such a large country. The work has to be delegated, and it goes to these thousands of ANC officials, some of them massively incompetent, massively corrupt. Maybe some of them have a low IQ, some of them are too old, some of them are super young, nepotism sometimes. And there will be good ANC guys. There's many. I can do a series of videos about good ANC people, actually, and it will take me a while to finish this series, because that's how many good people, well-known ANC people there are. But the fact of the matter is the ANC as a whole failed, like, for this property right thing. Okay, that's why people are pissed off at Mandela, because he's the figurehead of it. So let's just be clear about the history. Like, if you're a historian, please feel free to debate me. Additionally, the ANC's commitment to a mixed market economy as part of the negotiations was seen as a concession to neoliberal policies that favored large corporations and privatization over state-led development. The adoption of policies like growth, employment, and redistribution, or GEAR framework in the 90s, which emphasized fiscal austerity, liberalization, and privatization, marked a significant shift from the ANC's earlier vision of economic transformation. While GEAR aimed to attract foreign investment and stimulate economic growth, it was criticized for failing to address poverty and unemployment effectively. Many South Africans felt that GEAR prioritized the interest of big businesses over the needs of the marginalized, leaving the poorest communities with limited economic benefits. So, yes, like this mixed market economy, this is very, how can you say, it depends on the eye of the beholder. Like, it's very difficult. Like, what are you, like, any country in the world, almost every country, has, like, a mixed economy. That's just a fact. Chile is or used to be neoliberal. That's the only country that was neoliberal, that truly implemented the Chicago Boys' like full recommendations. Like, the United States isn't a neoliberal country. North Korea is the only truly communist country. Okay, there's not, everyone else is doing something in between. Like, China is doing something in between, skewing socialist, but more mixed market. Like, Europe, the rest of Africa, South America, you name it. Like, however, you can say that the problem is here is this like weird duality of like, do you want to follow capitalism and grow the economy? Because remember, this is a weakened economy. Apartheid was bankrupt. We have to build. Apartheid was bankrupt, and it basically kneecapped the black nation. So now you have to build a nation from scratch. So maybe capitalism is the best for it, because you have to grow from zero, okay? And you have to get investment, you have to get money in because you don't have money. Then on the other side, you have basically the idea that, okay, we don't have a lot of money, and the money we have is totally unfairly distributed. It has to be redistributed. And we have people with, we don't have good, let's say, healthcare, but we have people with zero healthcare. So let's redistribute the healthcare. Okay, both of these things are valid arguments. Let's be clear about it. And under certain conditions, they may work. Okay, neoliberalism will never work, or it can work for a very short time, and communism can never work, or it can work for a very short time. Okay, 10 years, 50 years, not a very long time. So mixed market is the answer, but I think what the script means here is the nature, or rather the priorities of the mixed market economy. So, in this case, I previously, in one of my videos, I mentioned how rich people, or white people, got after 1994. Like, my uncle got extremely rich. And he just did it because it was legal. The opportunities were available. So for a lot of people, and some black people as well, they got extremely rich. Our current, in November 2024, President Cyril Ramaphosa, he got extremely wealthy. And to put it into perspective, he comes from a trade unionist background. He's not the Elon Musk. So with Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Jack Ma, you can see that wealth is created out of scratch. What you think about these people is something, different, but it's a different matter. But you see, it's kind of strange when you see a trade unionist like Lula da Silva from Brazil or Cyril Ramaphosa suddenly become wealthy people. It's just strange, I'm not saying there's fair play involved. I mean, foul play. I'm not saying there's foul play involved. That's not what I'm saying. But there's many people black, white, whatever, foreigners who came to South Africa. The Gupta family from India came to South Africa and became fabulously wealthy. And, this is just part of a broken system. So for example, if you have someone who comes in like the Guptas, maybe you should do more, allow the capitalist free reign, but do your, what do you call it, your tests, your due diligence tests, to make sure that these people aren't dodgy and that they're not going to suck the blood out of the country like vampires. If you have local business people, make sure, and they want a loan, they want to have a state contract. Make sure these people have always paid their tax. Make sure they have never had a criminal record. If their son had a speeding ticket, make a note about it. Put it in a system, a system that can be easily accessed. And, this is so tax as well. For me personally, tax is the best way, the easiest way to control capitalism, to keep it in its lane, or keeping in its lane sounds negative, to extract the maximum benefit out of capitalism. And let's face it, whether you're communist or capitalist, these two economic systems, you want to, or Keynesian or whatever, you want to extract the maximum benefit out of your economic system, because why else would you implement this thing in the first place? So this is the problem with the ANC. They didn't structure this thing to benefit enough people. You want to create what you want to do, and this is what we failed to do. I didn't do it. I would have done. Okay, probably I would have failed as well because I'm not like a manager, but essentially the ANC failed to create a middle class. That's what you want. You want a large middle class, and the ANC seems to have focused a lot of on oligarchy. They basically ignored point one, they ignored white people who just got much richer. And in point two, they encouraged a black oligarchy with the idea that there would be trickle-down economics. Why would a black industrialist, let's say the guy's worth R1 billion, why would he go, tell me, and give away 30% of his fortune to build schools? Why would he do that? And I'm not saying that guy's a bad person. I'm just saying he became rich for a reason. Capitalists, these people are outliers. Regardless of your culture, your nationality, your gender, your race, whatever. These people who have this huge amount of money are outliers. They're not going to automatically donate to, there will be no trickle-down economics. I'm not saying trickle-down economics is a total fallacy. I'm not here to debunk it. Yes, that guy is going to spend some money. He's going to go to the Ferrari dealership. At the Ferrari dealership, you will buy a Ferrari. The Ferrari dealership, the profit from that, will be paid to the employees working at the Ferrari dealership. It will be paid to the importation company who imported the Ferrari to South Africa from Italy. These people at the importation company, or the secretary at the receptionist of the Ferrari shop. By the way, have you noticed? I don't know how many of you have been to a luxury car, what do you call it? A luxury car shop, dealership. I went there last year with one of my friends, a super good businessman, to buy, what did he buy? Maserati or something. It's quite funny how the receptionists at these places are extra beautiful. Extra beautiful, point one. Point two, the clothes are immaculate. Point three, the makeup and hair is immaculate. In any case, that woman will get the salary because that other guy bought a Ferrari. And she will then she will spend that money. She will basically pay the bond on her house. So the bank will make money from the loan. That loan money, some of that loan money, the rent of it, will go to a pensioner who invested his pension into the bank. The woman will go to the Spar supermarket and buy milk because she drinks milk with her coffee. She'll buy coffee as well, the cup. If she broke a cup last week, she'll buy a cup to drink her coffee from. If she drinks coffee, maybe she drinks tea or orange juice. I don't know. But she will spend money. Okay, so the money does go into the economy, but the problem is with these oligarchs, a lot of it remains stationary. The majority of it remains stationary somewhere in some investment that's not necessarily making money for benefiting greater people. If it's a investment, if they bought, I don't know, a mine, and that mine, or a factory, and that thing makes that thing employs 10,000 people. Totally different story. But a lot of them have this money just locked away, and that's a problem. So trickle-down economics doesn't work. Getting back to the point I'm making, which is tax. The way to reduce inequality is tax. Go and look at your first world countries. Okay, I know first, second, third world, fourth world is no longer a concept, but the ones I'm talking about, you pay a lot of tax. And that's why those countries are great, like because you pay tax. Canada is better than the US because they pay more tax. And with this tax money, the government, and with the assumption that they're not corrupt or stupid or, retarded or whatever, like they can then go and implement state programs. So tax money, is crucial. And yeah, it's like, so this is like the mixed market economy. The problem here is what they mention is GEAR, the Growth, Employment and Redistribution Framework. And yeah, it basically looked at austerity, liberalization and privatization. We didn't do a lot of privatization, so I just want to make that clear. Like, South Africa can maybe do with more privatization because the companies are not run by competent people. Like, we lose money to state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, as we call them in South Africa. However, austerity is also not necessarily always the best policy. Remember, austerity is also just a monetary policy. Like, you can borrow money if the interest on that money isn't ridiculous. Like, you can basically, you can like borrow money, and you can grow the state because you can afford to. Like, employment, is also good. Like, you can to grow the state, you can employ more people. But I feel the state isn't, or especially if we're not talking about Norway, we're talking about South Africa. So, sorry, I'll be mentioning, for the rest of my life, I'll be mentioning these Nordic countries because I think they're awesome. But like, they just have that Australia, to a lesser extent, Canada and Japan and South Korea, but like, not the United States. Sorry, Americans, like, you have too much work to do. Employment should rather be outsourced to the private sector, in the sense that I'm not saying like just bluntly expect the private sector to make money. That's stupid. Like, give the private sector incentives to create employment. Like, I think in a previous video I mentioned, like, why don't you like create a register of unemployed people, constantly skill them up online, and then give companies a tax cut for employing them for a set amount of time. Any value created by these individuals, you don't pay tax on it. Something like that. Like, they didn't do enough of this. So there was like, every time you will have like GEAR, for example. So this is an economic program. Like, think about it as like one of these 5-year programs of like the Soviet Union or China. They have like, they have goals, they have a plan, and the time frame. Okay, so sure, then it looks great. It looks like a strategy or project management plan or whatever. But the thing is, then this thing goes into the media. Like, they make some speeches and it looks like this thing that's gonna work. But then precious little has been done, and it's not like those of you who work in construction or for engineering companies or, whatever, like, when you do project management, you'll see the project manager comes to your desk every day and hovers around, like, asking you what's going on. A reason for that is to see if the work's getting done, and with these problems, with these things, these economic programs we had, GEAR, like growth, employment and redistribution. The other one was like RDP, redevelopment and distribution program. And the other one was like ASGISA, ASGIESA. I don't know what ASGISA stands for, but every time I would read one of these things, it seems like kind of the same thing. So it's as if the ANC doesn't know how to implement their plans and policies well. They come up with the idea and then they sit on it and do nothing. And when there's a media conference, when there's a protest by poor people, they will just read from the script, like, oh, blah, 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 this is our gear program, like sit back and relax, have a glass of Oros, smoke a joint, everything's under control, like, yes, then you're just going to make the people more angry, so, I don't know, it seems that the ANC didn't, they never think about implementation, and this was part of the transition problem, is there isn't enough thought given to how to implement things. Let's continue. As the ANC took control of the government, unfulfilled promises and expectations became another point of contention. Many South Africans believed that democracy would bring immediate improvements in their living conditions, especially in housing, education, healthcare, and employment. However, the reality of governance proved challenging, and the ANC struggled to meet the high expectations of the public. The limitations of state resources, combined with the complexities of transitioning from apartheid, meant that the progress was slower than anticipated. This gap between promises and delivery led to growing frustration, as the poverty and inequality that had characterized apartheid remained largely unchanged in the early years of democracy. So, yes, this is the single biggest failure. Well, no, I'm constantly saying single biggest failure, which may make this entire script fiat, but one of the failures, let's say one of the failures, but a major failure nonetheless, is broken promises. Like those of you who has had to go through any broken promise would know this. And I'm not just talking about political broken promises. If your boyfriend said that he will, freaking fix the kitchen cabinet, not that I'm saying women can't, maybe if your girlfriend's a very hands-on woman and you're a useless, not a useless man, if you're like a utility challenged man and your wife said she will fix the cabinet, by Friday it's not fixed. You ask her again, oh, did you fix the kitchen cabinet? Oh, no, honey, I was watching TV. Then you're like, oh, okay, she's just tired, she had a long day at work, she'll do it. Next week, Friday, honey, did you fix the cabinet? Oh no, my friends came along, Pam and Lucinda, and we went to the movies. You're like, okay, she has a right to go to the movies. A month later, you ask her, is it still done? Is it done yet? Oh no, but I will do it next year. So this becomes frustrating, and people live with these broken promises for years and years and years. They will live with these broken promises, and you see this leads to frustration and people become angry. And this is why the ANC, in May of 2024, they lost the majority. They were always above 50%. And then they fell below 50% to what did they get? 43% or something. They got, or 41, I don't know, they got 41% in May 2024. And it's a large part of it was because of broken promises. People just got tired. They were just screw you, I don't trust you. You're constantly promising me and then you're not doing it. So then it becomes, it's not even just laziness or incompetence, it's a form of lying. And then, people lose total trust in you. The only positive thing or ray of light I can shine from this, or that emanates from this, is essentially that if you have a society that's so destroyed as South Africa was in 1991, 1994, you know, you're going to have, like, to say that you're going to have hiccups would be an understatement of note. There's going to be massive clusterfucks of struggling, of effort, of toil, of, you know, relentless failure until you get something transformed. It's not easy, you know. So one also needs to take into consideration that the ANC had to fail to succeed in the end. And they did succeed in many areas, as I spoke about in the victory videos. However, this is like the failure videos, so I can't talk too much about that. But like although if you're watching this video 50 years from now for some weird reason, like, I would like to add that this video is being made in the atmosphere of disinformation and the rewriting of history in South Africa. So I just would like to set this record straight for those people who either haven't read, don't want to read, who don't believe in what they read, or is simply stupid. Like, and I mean it with empathy as well, actually. You know, like, I've been fooled before many times. You have been fooled many times before. Like, some of you less, some of you much more. But it's easy to deceive people, you know. North Koreans are deceived every day. They think, like, North Koreans think they live in the best country in the world. Seriously. Like, go and check it out. They think it's the best place ever. The people of Jonestown thought they were in the best place ever. Like, you know, so I just want to, this is why I'm talking, I'm putting the ANC in a bad light, because constantly it's just being shown in a bad light, which is fair now. It is fair, you know. But I just want to put a balance on it, you know, because, like, it seems that the conversation, like, goes in one way. And before I move on from this paragraph, I want to mention one thing. One of the reasons they failed is caderism. And this is their own fault. Like, caderism, for those, it's an English word, but for those of you who don't know, it's very common in South Africa. A cader is basically a political party operative that's employed in the government to do a specific function. Now, this would be similar to what they want to do in the US, the Project 2025, where you don't look at merit. You look at loyalty or ideology, or both. So, I was so irritated a couple of years ago. This guy, and it's a very smart guy, by the way. It's not stupid. It's got a PhD. He's got a lot of experience. Dr. Aubrey Matsiki. He wrote this pro-caderism article, which he basically stated something that you need a cader because only a cader, you know, has the ideological understanding for implementation. Okay, fair enough. But bottom line is you lose meritocracy. And there is the real, when ideology becomes so persistent, you know, when it becomes so driven, there's a real danger that you're just going to put a retard, absolute nincompoop. Sorry, I use the word retarded a lot. I don't mean to disparage the mentally ill. I just I'm old. I'm a 43-year-old white man. Yes, some things I can and cannot say. But the thing is, yeah, a nincompoop will come into the equation, and then he or she's the right person for the job. But it's so obvious that they're just useless. Like in Parliament, in the South African Parliament, we have had people who sleep. They sleep in Parliament. That's what they do. Now it has gone because people were just, freaking out about it. Like, how dare you sleep in Parliament? But then you get like R1 million per annum, by the way, if you're in Parliament. Like, it's a lot of money. Be careful who you vote for, because they'll get a lot of money. Caterism. Caterism is a big reason the ANC failed. The ANC's approach to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, while largely praised, was also faced criticism for its limitations. While the TRC provided the platform for victims to share their experiences and seek closure, it offered amnesty to many perpetrators of human rights abuses in exchange for confessions. The decision was controversial, as some families and communities felt that justice was sacrificed for the sake of reconciliation. The TRC's amnesty process meant that many perpetrators of violent crimes escaped formal punishment, leading to unresolved anger and resentment amongst victims and their families. Additionally, the TRC's mandate was limited to crimes committed during the apartheid era and did not address the broader structural injustices of apartheid, leaving some victims without full redress. So, the TRC, first, okay, this is a failures video, so what I can positively say about it is I'm going to keep very limited. The TRC is a very good idea, and it's copied in other countries. Like, check it out yourself. It's copied. The idea of the TRC was copied into other countries. If it was a bad idea, they would not copy it. Now, getting into the problems. So the TRC was created more for criminal behavior, like, in sense, like crimes against humanity, like torture, violations, theft, corruption, terrorism, like, you name it. Well, except, like, let's say, theft of property, okay? And, like, let's say, discrimination. That was not in the TRC. It looked at your bare, like, transgressions, okay? And, yeah, the TRC, it was hectic. It was like, I remember watching it on TV. It was like of the beat, because they went, the TRC went throughout the country, from town to town, almost from village to village, hearing cases. And they had like people working on it, and the news, it will often be in the news when it's like a big case. They would talk about it, and yeah, you would hear stories about torture, just like that, because the guy knows. Here was the deal: if you admit to your crime, and if you show contrition, or guilt, or what do you call it, berouw in my native language, regret. If you show regret, and if you tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, then you get an amnesty. And many of the leaders got amnesty. Nelson Mandela got amnesty. Remember, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist as well. He was there, and I don't mean he planted the bomb personally, but he was head of the ANC during the Church Square bombings. F.W. de Klerk got amnesty too. All of the late 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, like war crimes, like, for example, aiding and abetting the IFP, he was guilty of. He admitted it. The IFP admitted, the Mangosuthu Buthelezi admitted to his crimes, big leaders like president and the two vice presidents of the country in the next administration. They had to go before the TRC because they were criminals. You don't go before the TRC if you're not a criminal. Okay, let's be clear. However, it's very difficult because remember, apartheid wasn't pure Nazism. It wasn't like Stalinism or something where there's one person solely responsible or a massive driver of deaths. It was a system and a group that fought against the system, many people involved. So that's why you couldn't really prosecute the big fish. However, the small guys, they were very painful or created a lot of pain because the people who did the torture, the people who did the assassinations, the people who did plant the bombs, then it's much easier, it's much more painful. Let's say if you were a victim and now in this meeting of the TRC, because you get to, it's like a court, a bit of a court. You get to face your accuser, the accused face the accusee, the victim and the perpetrator see each other. It's very traumatic for a person who, let's say your sister was tortured, okay? Now you're seeing a torturer freaking 30 meters from you, sitting at another table, looking at you. Even if that person shows contrition and guilt and tells you the whole truth, he disposed of her body, he tells you where the body can be found, now she has a proper funeral, even then, you have to be a very strong person not to get some PTSD from that, because you're seeing the person responsible for your pain, right? If let's say, your sister was tortured and now you're sitting across from FW de Klerk, it's not that personal. He may have been the president, but he didn't order that specific attack. That guy was multiple layers of separation between the president and this guy, this assassin who carried out the assassination. The same with Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela didn't specifically order any terror attack to kill a specific. He wasn't I want John Peterson and his family dead. He never said anything like that. So even if you were to, if your family, your dad died in the Church Square bombing, and Nelson Mandela sitting across you, it's I'm not saying it's nothing, but it won't be as personal as seeing the real bomber or the real assassin or whatever. So you see, where I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again, because this series is long, we were trying to avoid a civil war. Okay, we were trying to avoid a civil war. So this is why all of this shit happened. Okay, the TRC wasn't just some random idea, that how can we implement neoliberalism in the country? That's stupid. It was a way to see, okay, how can we get the most amount of justice without driving these people underground? Because the perpetrators, as soon as they realize they're being hunted, they'll either flee the country, go to freaking Argentina or wherever, or they will go underground. Worse, they'll go underground in the country and cause more terrorism there, because then they're like, okay, we have nothing to lose. We're being hunted by the police, so we may as well continue a guerrilla war now that we have lost the election. You see, so this is the thing. And then the problem is that the property, stolen property, and discrimination wasn't addressed in the TRC. Now, obviously, you can't really address that in the TRC, because the TRC I would view as more of a direct physical criminal, if you experienced a violation, that's the place to go to. But they could have made a different commission, like a commission of, let's say, investigation of theft, like seizure of property and corruption during apartheid. And then that commission, if you were a journalist, you can drop any documents there. If you are a victim, you can go and lay a complaint there. If you are a perpetrator, like someone who received land that that's not yours, you can go and do a confession there. Whatever, at least do something as opposed to nothing. Continue. During the transition, the ANC also struggled to prevent outbreaks of violence and unrest, particularly between supporters of the ANC and the Inkatha Freedom Party in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. These violent clashes, which resulted in thousands of deaths, highlighted the fragile and tense environment during the transition period. While the ANC advocated for peace, its inability to prevent these conflicts led to criticism that the party failed to provide sufficient protection for civilians caught in the violence. This tension with the IFP complicated the transition and delayed progress, straining the ANC's efforts to build unity across political and ethnic divides. So the IFP. The IFP is like a major transgressor in this transition story, the story of transition from apartheid to democracy in South Africa. They were a very violent, they were freedom fighters, but they were also violent criminals. They created a lot of problems. But the thing is, the way the ANC handled it, the ANC then just went after the IFP, or the Inkatha Freedom Party, with a huge amount of violence. That is not really, I don't want to go into philosophy now. I'll do that in another time. But just automatically, doing violence or answering violence with violence is not going to solve the problem. And this is what happened, with the IFP. They didn't really stop because the ANC's violence was worse and they got scared of the ANC. They just they got incentives to stop. So the National Party stopped supporting them and they realized they can get some political concessions. And that's why they stopped their terror. Not because the ANC terrorized them, and they were scared of the ANC. No. On the contrary. But the way the ANC dealt with the IFP was not ideal. They could have stopped it. Also, I believe we spoke about the necklaces. The necklacing, is it somewhere in my script? No, it's not. Let me talk about it. Okay, during the transition, one of the ways the freedom fighters would address fight their enemies was rather informers. If you were a police informant, or a suspected police spy, they would necklace you. Okay, necklace, like, which meant taking a car tire, putting it over your shoulders, put some petrol. If you know anything about necklacing, which will be interesting if you do, tell us some more about necklacing. But like, you put some petrol in the car tire as well. I don't know how it stays there, but you put it over the person's shoulder and douse them with petrol. So if it's like, okay, if it's a fat person, the thing will just, or a big muscular person, the thing will just be around their neck, hence the name necklace. But if it's the idea, oh, that sounds so awful. Like, ideally, if it's a scrawny person, you put the tire like across their arms like this, so they can't. You literally, you're like a straitjacket, and then they set you on fire and you burn to death. Like, and it's, you know, it's a pretty awful way to die. Those of you who've watched the TV series The Americans, like, there's one episode where they show a necklacing. It was really brutal. Like, the ANC just did this like quite often, and in particular, the so-called Winnie Mandela Soccer Club, football club, the Winnie Mandela Football Club. They were a bunch of youths under the command of Winnie Mandela. That was the ex-wife. Is she still alive? No, she died. Like, that was the ex-wife of Nelson Mandela, and they did some militant work, but essentially they killed one, maybe they killed more. Usually if you know about one, it's the tip of the iceberg. Like, how many people did Ted Bundy kill? 8. He killed 8 we know of. Like, murderers usually go for self-preservation. So essentially, like, I am not saying she killed a dozen people or whatever, you know, like, I'm just saying, like, there was this police investigation into the death of Stompie Sepe, that it seemed that her football club was like responsible for the necklacing of this, he was like maybe 15 years old, 14 years old, of the necklacing of this boy, for being a alleged spy. So yes, like, this is like one thing. You can go to the if you're ever in, don't go to Johannesburg, by the way. It's a super ugly city. It's not touristic. Like, if you go to South Africa, you only need to go to 2 places really. Go to the Kruger National Park and go to, like, freaking, what's it called? Cape Town. Cape Town and the surrounding areas where the winelands are. But if you want to be in Johannesburg, we call it Joburg for short, go to the Apartheid Museum. But it's nasty. It's going to be like the Anne Frank Museum. So don't go there if those kinds of things scare you. Like, if you're still watching this video, I'm assuming that you are a person who will be into that kind of shit. But like, there they have some videos of, like, well, at least when I was there, they had videos of necklacing, you know, and it was, my word, like, it was really nasty. Like, you know, they showed videos of, like, the bodies, like, still smoldering the next morning. Because remember, the tire burns, like, throughout the night because it's rubber. So yeah, that's like some other transitional violence the ANC was like involved in. Hence the reluctance then also of the MP. You can see that this didn't happen in a vacuum. You see, like, for every action, there's a reaction. And for those of you who know physics, you know, like, there's vibrations, right? Like, and these vibrations, like, it's like an elastic band. You know, if you connect the elastic band to the roof and like a piece of stone at the bottom, and you pull it down, you let it go, it will shoot up and it'll go up and down. It's like, you know, it's reactions. And hence the reluctance, for example, I think, of the National Party to engage, or the apartheid government to engage with the ANC, was because of all of this violence. Now, I'm not saying, I have said it before, to make an omelette, you need to break an egg. So maybe yes, the ANC had to resort to violence to get rid of the apartheid government, because the apartheid government was violent. Like, it's just, you'll always be able to argue this. Like, you were violent. Like, you know, so there we have it. Let's continue. Moreover, internal division within the ANC regarding the direction of the transition led to further challenges. Different factions within the party had competing views on the pace and extent of transformation, with some members pushing for more radical changes, while others supported a more gradual approach. These internal conflicts sometimes weakened the ANC's ability to present a unified vision, leading to inconsistencies in policy implementation. The presence of the South African Communist Party, or SACP, within the ANC alliance also complicated decision-making. Not all ANC members supported the SACP's more radical policies. These ideological tensions occasionally hindered the party's cohesion and affected its ability to govern effectively. I don't know if the South African Communist Party was radical. Like, my idea of radical is someone who wants to kill someone else. That's radical. The South African Communist Party is just stupid. Like, thinking, oh, okay, like if we implement the failed Marxist policy that is failing right now in the Soviet Union, or no, the Soviet Union ceased to exist in 1989, right? So, and this is like 2 years, 4 years, 5 years after 1989. Whatever. Like, so the SACP knew it didn't work. Okay, so they basically could have given up on the idea, or at least reformed it in their own minds. But the main thing is that you have what the ANC is, like what they refer to the ANC in South Africa is a broad church. Okay, a broad church, meaning that you have so many factions, like in the ANC. It was like Game of Thrones, like maybe not as pernicious and dramatic as Game of Thrones, but you have people from very different schools of thought. So let's talk about some of them. If you're a student of history, or a scholar, or if you were in the ANC in the 80s or 90s, please tell us, and tell us of the internal divisions, which were the parties. The ones I know of were the people like locked up in or on Robben Island, like Nelson Mandela, for example. They were prisoners of the regime. Then you had people who were in South Africa, who had arrest warrants out against them, but who were fighting as guerrilla fighters. They had to move very clandestinely because the apartheid government was very good at hunting them down. Then you had the people, then you had the exiles. There were three groups of exiles. Like, you had the people in the Soviet Union, mostly going there for studying and training and then returning. You had people in Europe drumming up like liberal support or social justice support within Europe to get sanctions against apartheid South Africa. and you had the exiles in the surrounding countries, the neighboring countries of South Africa, in particular, like Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, to an extent Mozambique. Like, I mean, Mozambique was a lot, but then at one stage, the Mozambican government and the apartheid government signed the accord, in which they said, like, okay, we will stop cross-border raids if you stop the terrorist incursions, and then that kind of stopped, although not fully, but mostly. So you had all of these groups. Oh yeah, and then you had like people who were not. Yeah, because it was illegal to be an ANC member. So if you're an ANC member, you're already committing a crime. So the police have to arrest you. But you may be an ANC sympathizer, and someone who then basically later probably joined the ANC. But like, let's say, just living legally in South Africa, like, let's say a lawyer. If you're a lawyer for someone in the ANC, okay, that is like pretty close to being an ANC member, although you're not a member yourself. Like, you had all these people and they had different ideas about strategy and tactics and policy and implementation and the speed of which implementation should be done, with which it should be done. So you see, like, it was all of these, like, to give you and then there's also like the tribal differences, like, because remember, there's many different tribes in South Africa. Then there's also the racial difference. You had like, it was like mostly black African, but you had actually no, it was like very broad. Like, that's what I like. To be honest, that's what I actually like about the ANC is the ANC. You won't believe me, but I will stand by this. Okay, now it's less so. It's less so in the last 5 to 10 years because the ANC kind of under Jacob Zuma lost its way. But before Jacob Zuma, or in Jacob Zuma's first term, the ANC was actually very broad and inclusive. You had like Indian people, you had like mixed ethnicity people, you had like white people, like Greek, South Africans, whatever. They were in the ANC, and like they were, so you, and then some of them are different religions, like some of them were Muslim, whatever, some of them were atheist, like, so all of these people are in the same organization. So it's it's truly a broad church. Like, so of course there's going to be like internal division, but you see the problem with too much division is that you can't allow it to derail you. And you'll see a recurring factor in the series on ANC failures would be that the ANC, whatever they did it too slowly. And it's because of internal factions. Let's go on. Finally, the ANC's failure to address corruption and accountability during the transition laid the groundwork for governance issues that would become more pronounced in later years. While the ANC initially focused on building a democracy and transparent government, allegations of corruption began to surface as some officials took advantage of their new positions. The ANC struggled to implement strong anti-corruption measures, and its commitment to accountability sometimes wavered in the face of loyalty to its members. The leniency allowed a culture of impunity to develop, creating challenges for good governance and undermining public trust in the ANC. So, yes, like you'll see that corruption also it wasn't a binary. I was in Brazil for a while, And you see, but Brazil also had various kinds of governments. And at that stage, Lula da Silva was, when I was there, Lula da Silva, his first term, he was president, but also it was at the time of Lava Jato, Operation Car Wash, and like, that's like a socialist government, right? So all of your right-wing people, obviously, but then also a lot of centrists and even left-wing people would say, yeah, but you're corrupt. You know, there's like, you're this corrupt party, the socialist or the workers' party. But I spoke to this guy, and he wasn't really a workers' party guy, this black Brazilian, and he told me, look, we have had corruption in Brazil for 500 years, you know, since like colonization began. So you can argue that, but the ANC always claimed it as this moral superiority. They claimed they were morally superior, better than the rest. So then you would think, like, okay, one of the things you will do is at least not be corrupt, at least don't steal money, right? Well, wrong. They did steal money, like, and it began in the beginning. And you see, it started little by little, and then it just got worse and worse, like, until you found the administration of Jacob Zuma, which was just, yeah, Jacob Zuma haunts me to an extent. Like, he wants a lot of people. The sheer incompetence and corruption, well, mostly corruption under Zuma. We call it state capture. In summary, transition, finishing off this video about transition was difficult. It was a difficult period for everyone involved. And the ANC failed on many, many fronts, especially like violence. They were very violent. They didn't like return like land, like, because like the best thing, like when you say you're going to go to gym, for example, you do it immediately. Like, you go, like, you have your last pizza and movies, binge watch Netflix on Sunday, Monday you're in the gym, and you're keeping the stay in the gym until you've achieved your goals. Like, you know, the ANC, they could have like returned some land immediately, you know, like ask the apartheid guys, okay, give us all the locations or the deeds of land that's not being used. We need to return it immediately. Give us also all the registrations of the owners that suddenly got new land at some point. We need to know where goes what. You know, they didn't do any redistribution of wealth. You know, like, the thing is, like, now we still haven't had true. Look, I'm no fan of the collective, you know, like a collective factory, but, you know, we are now 35 years into democracy. If they started the collective factory in 1996, like, that thing would have like failed quickly, or worked for 10 or 15 years and then failed, or would still be existing and thriving. We don't know, because they didn't implement it, you see. So now this becomes a project for the future, a risky project, which they could have done back then. You know, this is like a criticism. And then the weird way with which they married both capitalism and socialism, which I mentioned you should do. They are intermarried, mixed economies, but you need a specific strategy. Like, every country is slightly different, you know. So the ANC didn't do this, like, during the transition, and for that they will be remembered. Like, if not in this video, by lots of other historians and history books and other YouTube videos and podcasts and audiobooks and books you can find in the library. So in any case, by the way, there's also a video about the good stuff of the transition. If you're a ANC fanatic, please don't hunt me down and murder me like I did make a good video of you, or try to. No, it is. I believe it's okay. Like, yeah, ANC, you guys did do some good stuff. So I'm just pointing out the bad stuff you also did. Like, in any case, thank you for listening to me and have a nice day. Bye-bye.